I think we finally reached the end of the tutorial videos. I think this is going to be the last one. I've made 6 of these now. We've covered aperture, ISO, shutter speed, metering, and drive mode. The last one is focus modes. Your camera has a lot of different ways of focusing, and the way it probably comes configured out of the box is what most manufacturers refer to as single autofocus mode. Basically, as you press the shutter halfway, the camera will focus on wherever you told it to focus, and it'll lock that focus and hold it until you take that shot, which is great when you're shooting things that don't move or don't move very much. The problem comes when you are shooting while you are moving or shooting while your subject is moving towards you or away from you. It is possible that in between the time when you locked focus and when you actually finished pressing the shutter button to take the image, that your subject may have changed distance. It may have gotten closer to you, it may have gotten farther away from you, and is now, as a result, no longer in focus. So, if you just take your camera out of the box and you have that single autofocus mode, and you go on a dark ride in a theme park, and you notice a lot of your shots are not soft from motion blur, but soft from being out of focus, you might want to check your focus mode. There are a lot of different types of focus modes available on different cameras. Almost all of them have some kind of tracking autofocus, where not only will the camera lock focus onto a subject, it will then track that subject, or it will do its best to track that subject and maintain its focus on that subject as that subject moves around in the frame, as it moves closer and farther away. Different cameras do this with different levels of success. Generally, the higher end cameras that are geared towards sports and wildlife and action photography, they do really well. Some of the older models and some of the lower end models might not do as good of a job, but it's worth experimenting with your particular model of camera and seeing how well it can cope with tracking different subjects. My Olympus cameras, my last 2 Olympus cameras, the EM1X and the OM1 Mark II, have very little problem tracking moving subjects, and so it makes shooting things on dark rides very, very, very easy. So scroll through the settings on your camera and look for something that's called continuous autofocus, tracking autofocus. I think Canon calls it servo autofocus or servo AI autofocus, something to that effect. And that's the setting you're going to want to use if you're shooting dark rides, especially. If you're in a moving vehicle, you're moving past subjects are moving towards you or away from you. Almost any of the rides in a Disney park or any theme park, you're going to want some kind of tracking autofocus. Let me show you an example that hopefully will illustrate what I'm talking about, what it looks like through the lenses. So first I put the camera in single autofocus mode, and I focused on the fine little fuzzy details of my microphone windsock. And you can see the camera will lock focus, but as soon as I move the camera closer or farther away from the subject, that focal plane stays the same distance from the front of the lens. And so if I move the camera at all, or if the subject were to move closer to me, it would become fuzzy because it's no longer in focus. And now I'm going to change the camera into the continuous autofocus with tracking mode that I prefer to use. And now you'll see as I lock focus on the same subject and then I move the camera forward and back, it mostly stays in focus. Every now and then the camera gets tricked and tries to focus on the tabletop or something else that it looks kind of like the same texture. But generally, as the subject moves relative to the camera, it will do a better job of maintaining focus on the subject. And that's what you need when you're on a moving ride vehicle and subjects are moving back and forth in front of you, getting close to you, getting farther away from you. The third option you have is to use manual focus. You saw that in both of those selections I made earlier, single and continuous, there was also an MF there as well. So that means in both of those modes, at any point, if the autofocus is not working, if the camera just cannot figure out what to focus on, I can just grab the focus ring on the lens and manually focus. Not all cameras have that option, not all lenses have that option, but it's one of those things that's useful one time out of 100, where your camera just has no idea what the hell's going on, and you've got to tell it where to focus, or at least focus quickly for it to get it started. Then it goes, oh, now I know what to track, and then it can focus. Generally, I don't recommend manual autofocus because it's way too labor intensive, and generally you're just not going to be fast enough, or you're not going to be able to see well enough through either the viewfinder or on the LCD. You're not going to be able to keep track, or keep up, I should say. You're not going to be able to keep up with things coming at you and moving past you on a dark ride. If you're stationary, that's a different thing. If it's a parade that's moving very slowly, that's a different thing. But if you're on Thunder Mountain trying to get a shot of the goat as you go around the corner, you're probably not going to get that with manual focus. You can try, maybe you're better than I am at it, but generally manual focus is for slow moving subjects, stationary subjects that are also very hard for your camera to get a lock on for whatever reason. So generally I steer clear of the manual focus.